My name is Clara, and at 38, I thought I'd finally built my own quiet corner of the world. 4 years ago, I poured every cent I had, and all of my soul, into buying and restoring an old Victorian house nobody else wanted. It was my sanctuary, a testament to years of quiet resilience and hard-won independence. This wasn't just a house, it was the embodiment of my dreams, painstakingly brought to life by my own hands. Then my sister, Chloe, decided to get a divorce. A messy, dramatic affair that threatened to unravel her seemingly perfect life. And that's when my parents, Mark and Susan, delivered an ultimatum so shocking it felt like a betrayal of my very existence. Sell my dream home, the only place I'd ever truly called my own, to pay for her mistakes, or be disowned from the family. It was a choice designed to crush me, to strip away my autonomy and force me back into the role of silent provider they had always expected. What they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that the very walls of that house, the ones they so casually demanded I surrender, held a secret that could shatter the carefully constructed facade of our family. A truth I had accidentally uncovered that was about to change everything for all of us. If you're watching this, drop a comment and let me know where you're viewing from. Are you nestled in a cozy town, or are you navigating the hustle and bustle of a big city? Before I tell you about the shocking court's verdict that left everyone in the courtroom, including my own family, utterly stunned, make sure you hit that like button to show your support and subscribe to my channel. You won't want to miss more true stories about navigating treacherous family dynamics, standing your ground, and reclaiming your power when it feels like the world is conspiring against you. To truly grasp the depth of my parents' demand, to understand how they could even conceive of such a cruel and audacious request, you have to delve into the intricate, often frustrating dynamic of my family. Since Chloe and I were children, there were always, and I mean always, two distinct sets of rules, meticulously applied. One for me, the dutiful, responsible eldest daughter, and a completely different, far more lenient one for my younger sister, Chloe, who is 4 years my junior. I was the responsible one, the quiet achiever. I dedicated myself to my studies, earning scholarships through sheer hard work and late nights hunched over textbooks, allowing me to pursue a stable, albeit humble, career path as a historical archivist. My passion lay in preserving the past, in finding the often overlooked beauty and profound wisdom hidden within forgotten stories, dusty documents, and crumbling artifacts. I embraced a life of quiet contentment, meticulously planned, diligently saving every penny. Chloe, on the other hand, was an absolute whirlwind, a force of nature driven by impulse and a craving for constant validation. She was effortlessly charming, undeniably beautiful, and always, without fail, the magnetic center of attention. Her life was a series of dramatic entrances and exits, grand gestures, and often expensive failures. While I was meticulously saving for a down payment on a reliable, if slightly used car, a symbol of my hard-won independence, my parents, without a moment's hesitation, bought her a brand-new, flashy convertible for her high school graduation. Their reasoning? "She just needs a little fun in her life, Clara." My mother would gush, oblivious to the sting of their blatant favoritism. "She's so vibrant, she deserves to shine." MU. The stark contrast continued into adulthood, shaping every significant milestone. When I, fresh out of college, found myself laid off from my entry-level position during a particularly brutal recession, I struggled for months to find work. My father, with a dismissive pat on my shoulder, offered only platitudes. "That's life, kid. You'll have to tighten your belt and figure it out." There was no offer of financial help, no suggestion of support. Just a cold, hard lesson in self-reliance. I ended up taking on extra shifts at a bookstore and tutoring in the evenings, barely making ends meet. Yet, years later, when Chloe, citing a vague lack of inspiration, dramatically quit a promising marketing job she'd held for less than a year, my parents didn't hesitate. They paid her lavish rent for 6 consecutive months, insisting she needed the time to find herself and reconnect with her muse. The message was clear. My struggles were character building. Hers were simply phases to be financed. This deep-seated favoritism wasn't born out of overt malice. It was more like an unspoken, ingrained current that shaped our every interaction, a silent truth in the fabric of our family. I was the reliable one, the one meant to be stable and dependable, serving as the silent, unquestioned safety net for Chloe's more turbulent existence. Chloe, conversely, was indulged, permitted to chase every fleeting whim and expensive caprice, secure in the knowledge that a soft landing, courtesy of my parents, would always be waiting. I had, for the most part, accepted my assigned role, finding profound joy and quiet satisfaction in my work, and the fierce independence it afforded me. It was this independence, this unwavering commitment to building something of my own, that led to what I considered my greatest achievement, the house. It wasn't just any house. It was a magnificent, yet tragically neglected, 1,890 Victorian mansion that had been abandoned for decades, its former grandeur obscured by layers of grime and decay. The paint was peeling in long, curling strips. The roof was riddled with leaks, and the once proud garden had become an impassable jungle of weeds and thorny bushes. Yet, when I first laid eyes on it, I didn't see ruin. I saw incredible potential. I saw the ghost of its former glory, the stories etched into its worn floorboards, the promise of light filtering through its grimy, yet still beautiful, stained glass windows. My archival instincts kicked in. I spent countless hours, often late into the night, meticulously researching its history, poring over dusty blueprints and old city records, piecing together its forgotten narrative. I used my entire life's savings, every hard-earned dollar, to buy it for an unbelievably low price at a city auction, a price no one else was willing to pay for what they perceived as a crumbling liability. For the next 4 grueling but immensely rewarding years, every spare weekend, every vacation day, every single dollar that wasn't allocated to essential bills was poured into bringing it back to its former glory. I taught myself the lost arts of plastering walls, meticulously restoring original hardwood flooring, and painstakingly repairing intricate woodwork. I spent hundreds of hours on my hands and knees, my fingers aching, stripping countless layers of paint from the original fireplace tiles, uncovering their vibrant patterns. My parents, true to form, thought I was utterly insane. "Why on earth are you wasting your hard-earned money on that absolute ruin, Clara?" my mother would repeatedly ask, her voice laced with thinly veiled disapproval. "You could buy a nice, perfectly new, maintenance-free condo, somewhere modern and sensible." Chloe, of course, found endless amusement in my endeavors, often laughing openly. "Good luck with your haunted house, sis," she'd quip, never failing to miss an opportunity for a sarcastic jab. They simply couldn't, or wouldn't, understand that, to me, this house was infinitely more than just bricks and mortar. It was a living, breathing piece of history, a profound testament to perseverance, beauty, and resilience. More than that, it was the very first thing in my entire life that felt truly, unequivocally mine, built not by circumstance or inheritance, but by my own hands and my unwavering determination. Once the house was finally finished, its restoration complete, their dismissive tune abruptly changed. The years of ridicule and casual mockery slowly morphed into a quiet, simmering envy. My home, with its meticulously manicured gardens, its sparkling windows, and its beautifully restored interior became, almost by default, the preferred setting for all family gatherings. Yet even then, it was still never truly treated as mine. Instead, it was subtly, often implicitly, viewed as a family amenity, a convenient backdrop for their social lives. Chloe would frequently borrow it, without asking, to host impromptu parties for her ever-changing circle of friends, invariably leaving behind a chaotic mess for me to tirelessly clean up. My parents would, with astonishing regularity, invite guests over without even the courtesy of informing me, then proceed to proudly brag about our daughter's excellent taste, as if they'd personally had a significant hand in its creation. Each instance was a subtle erosion of my ownership, a quiet undermining of my efforts. Each time, I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood, telling myself that this constant slight, was simply the unspoken price of maintaining some semblance of family peace. Over the years, I had learned to set small, almost imperceptible boundaries, but I had never truly pushed back, never forcefully resisted the relentless tide of unfairness that had, for so long, defined the very fabric of our lives. I, perhaps foolishly, thought that I could continue enduring this low-level injustice indefinitely, that it was simply my lot in life. But I had no idea that a far more destructive storm was rapidly approaching, a tempest that would ultimately force me to make an impossible choice between the hollow illusion of my family and the very foundation of the life I had so painstakingly, so sacrificially built for myself. My quiet existence was about to be irrevocably shattered, and I would be forced to confront truths I never imagined. As it so often was in the tumultuous narrative of my life, was Chloe. 2 years prior, she had, in a flurry of extravagant spending and calculated social climbing, married Richard, a powerful real estate developer. Richard was a man who exuded an almost artificial charm, with a flashy smile that never quite reached his cold eyes and a smug confidence that grated on my nerves. I, instinctively, never fully trusted him, sensing a hollowness beneath the polished veneer. My parents, however, were absolutely ecstatic. For them, it was the culmination of their lifelong aspirations for Chloe. Not only was their golden child finally settling down, but she was doing so with someone incredibly wealthy, a fact they tirelessly trumpeted to anyone who would listen. They spared no expense, throwing a lavish, ostentatious wedding that stretched their finances to their absolute limit, proudly crowing about their daughter's perfect match and the elevated social standing it afforded them. I, ever the dutiful daughter, contributed a significant amount toward the astronomical cost, framing it, both for myself and for them, as a heartfelt gift, though deep down I knew, with a bitter clarity, that it was far more expected than genuinely appreciated. Their marriage, as I had somewhat cynically predicted, quickly transformed into a public spectacle, a carefully curated performance meticulously documented and broadcast across social media. Their feeds were an endless scroll of breathtaking European vacations, ostentatious luxury cars, and glittering, exclusive dinner parties. Chloe, finally, was living the extravagant, unburdened life my parents had always firmly believed she deserved, a stark contrast to my own quiet, deliberate existence. Meanwhile, I continued my own unassuming path, finding profound contentment in my meaningful work and the hard-won peace within the walls of my cherished home. A small, almost guilty, part of me felt a sense of relief that the relentless financial pressure, which had always seemed to gravitate towards me, was now seemingly off my parents' shoulders and, by extension, off mine. That fragile peace, however, was destined to shatter, and shatter it did, on a seemingly ordinary Sunday afternoon. Chloe and Richard had, predictably, skipped the weekly family dinner at my house, a common occurrence that no longer surprised me. But then, around 9 o'clock that evening, a figure appeared at my front door, alone. It was Chloe, but she looked like a ghost of her usual glamorous self. Her expensive silk dress was wrinkled and stained, one heel was broken on her designer shoes, and her eyes, normally sparkling with mischief, were now red and swollen. Her meticulously applied makeup streaked tragically down her ashen cheeks. "I left him," she sobbed, her voice raw with despair, collapsing into my arms. "He's a monster, a lying, cheating monster. He ruined everything." End quote. For the next few agonizing hours, she spun a convoluted, messy tale of Richard's pervasive infidelity, his intricate web of financial lies, and a final, volcanic argument that had culminated in her packing a single bag and storming out, abandoning their opulent life. My conditioned response of sympathy immediately took over. Despite the chasm of our differences, the years of unspoken resentment, she was, after all, my sister. I held her, offering a comfort I rarely received. I made her soothing herbal tea, something I knew she despised, and let her cry herself into an exhausted sleep in my guest room, a small, stubborn part of me unable to ignore the fact that even in her deepest despair, she still managed to look like a tragic heroine from a melodramatic movie. The very next day, my parents arrived, their faces a frantic mixture of barely suppressed panic and simmering fury. They immediately coddled Chloe, stroking her hair, whispering reassurances, telling her how incredibly brave she was for leaving, and promising, yet again, that they would always, always be there for her. And then, their attention, like a predatory spotlight, swung sharply toward me. "You'll have to let Chloe stay here for a while, Clara," my mother stated, her voice devoid of any pretense of a request. It was an undeniable, non-negotiable command. "She needs a safe, familiar place to regroup. She's too fragile to be alone." Of course. What else could I do? My entire life had been conditioned to comply with their unspoken expectations. I agreed. But a while, as I had learned from bitter experience, quickly became an indefinite, suffocating occupation. Chloe, with an air of entitlement that hadn't dulled even in her distress, quickly transformed my guest room into her personal command center, an explosion of designer clothes spilling out of the closet and taking over every available surface. Her frequent, tearful, and often incredibly loud phone calls with her high-priced lawyer became the grating new soundtrack of my once peaceful home. The fragile peace I had so painstakingly cultivated within my sanctuary was utterly shattered, replaced by an unbearable tension that permeated every room. The real insidious conflict, however, truly began when the horrifying details of the divorce proceedings started to emerge. Richard, a man utterly devoid of sentimentality, backed by his formidable team of high-priced, ruthless lawyers, was playing hardball, a brutal, take-no-prisoners game. He relentlessly claimed that Chloe had flagrantly violated a crucial clause in their meticulously drafted prenuptial agreement, and he was fighting, with every legal maneuver possible, to ensure she walked away with absolutely nothing. The divorce, already bitter, quickly escalated into an incredibly expensive and tragically public spectacle, dragging our family name through the mud of tabloid headlines. My parents, in a desperate attempt to salvage Chloe's future, quickly drained their already dwindling life savings to cover her exorbitant initial legal fees. But soon, with the relentless churn of legal bills, even that money was gone. A palpable wave of panic, cold and pervasive, began to set in. That's when the subtle, yet increasingly pointed, glances started coming my way, invariably gravitating towards me, and, more specifically, towards my meticulously restored house. At first, they were just fleeting hints, almost imperceptible suggestions. "This house is so beautiful, Clara," my mother would say, her eyes lingering on the original crown molding in the living room. "It must be worth a fortune on the current market." Another time, my father, with a calculated casualness, remarked, "It's such a shame to have all that valuable equity just sitting idle in one asset. That kind of money could do an incredible amount of good for the family right now." Oh, each of these seemingly innocuous comments landed like a small, poisoned dart, a constant, insidious reminder that my hard-won security, my cherished independence, was simply seen as a readily available resource to be unhesitatingly tapped. I tried, desperately, to ignore them, to focus on providing Chloe with the emotional support she so clearly needed, despite my own rising resentment. But I could feel the very ground shifting beneath my feet, the tectonic plates of my family dynamic grinding dangerously. It began with just an offhand comment tossed across the dinner table, but it was, I now realize with chilling clarity, the first barely discernible crack in the dam, and I was about to be mercilessly swept away by an overwhelming, relentless flood of expectation and insatiable demand. My peaceful life, built on such solid foundations, was about to be engulfed. Once it began, was terrifyingly swift and brutally relentless. It started, as most things in my family did, with money. My parents, their faces grim and set with a chilling determination, sat me down at my kitchen table one evening, their expressions devoid of warmth or empathy. "Clara," my father began, his voice flat and authoritative, "Chloe's lawyer needs another substantial retainer, a staggering $20,000, to aggressively pursue her case. Your mother and I are, quite frankly, tapped out. We've exhausted every last resource. We need you to step up and help." $20,000. The figure hit me like a physical blow. It was a huge, crippling chunk of my carefully hoarded emergency savings. Money I had meticulously built up over years of self-denial and stringent budgeting, a vital buffer against the unpredictability of life. I hesitated, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. "I'm not sure I can—" "Mom, Dad, that's a significant amount." "I have my own financial responsibilities." "Don't be so incredibly selfish, Clara," my mother cut in, her voice now sharp as a freshly honed blade, her eyes flashing with indignant fury. "This is your sister, your own flesh and blood. She's losing absolutely everything. Her entire future is in jeopardy. You, on the other hand, have a beautiful, secure home and a stable, well-paying job. This is the absolute least you can do for your family." Her words twisted the knife, designed to inflict maximum emotional damage, to exploit my deeply ingrained sense of duty. The guilt trip, a tactic they had perfected over decades, worked. Feeling utterly cornered, my throat tight with suppressed resentment, I reluctantly agreed. I transferred the money the very next day, a sick, hollow feeling spreading through the pit of my stomach as I watched my carefully nurtured account balance plummet. I desperately tried to rationalize it, to tell myself that it was just a one-time thing, a necessary, painful sacrifice for the sake of family harmony. I was profoundly, devastatingly wrong. 2 months later, they came to me again, their expressions even more grim, their demands even bolder. This time, it was a staggering $30,000. Chloe's case, they explained with a weariness I almost believed, was becoming increasingly complex, requiring the expertise of an expensive forensic accountant to meticulously trace Richard's hidden assets. This time, however, something inside me, a tiny, stubborn spark, flared. I tried with a trembling voice to push back. "I truly cannot continue funding this, Mom, Dad. I pleaded, my voice barely above a whisper. I have my own bills, my own future to think about. I've given all I can. Chloe's reaction, overhearing my desperate plea from the living room, was merciless. I can't believe you, Clara, she shrieked, storming into the kitchen, her face contorted with unadulterated fury. I am fighting for my entire life, fighting for survival, and you're worried about your pathetic future? What future? You just have your old, dusty house and your even dustier books. You have nothing to lose. Her words were a calculated strike, designed to diminish me, to make my life seem utterly insignificant in comparison to her dramatic struggles. That house is my future, Chloe, I shot back, finally, inevitably, losing my temper, my voice cracking with emotion. I built it. It represents everything I've worked for. Oh, please, Clara, my father interjected, stepping in, as always, to take Chloe's side, his voice dripping with condescension. It's just a building, for crying out loud. Family, true family, is infinitely more important than any material possession. The argument, a familiar, toxic dance, ultimately ended with me, once again, caving. I felt utterly drained, profoundly disrespected, and consumed by a bitter resentment that began to curdle inside me like a potent poison. My house, my cherished sanctuary, no longer felt like a haven. It had become, terrifyingly, a gilded prison. Chloe, emboldened by her perceived victory, no longer even bothered to act like a guest. She paraded around as if she were the rightful lady of the manor. She would invite her endless stream of friends over without a shred of common courtesy, leaving behind mountains of dirty dishes in the sink, their laughter echoing through the halls I had meticulously restored. She even began to openly criticize my decorating choices. This place needs a serious injection of life, Clara, she'd declare, wrinkling her nose at an antique armchair I had painstakingly reupholstered. It's so old, so terribly dreary. One particularly infuriating weekend, she borrowed a rare, irreplaceable restored 19th century camera from my carefully curated collection, an invaluable artifact that was an integral part of my professional archival work to use, without my permission, as a mere prop for an elaborate Instagram photoshoot. She returned it days later, tossed carelessly on my entryway table, with a prominent, heartbreaking crack across its delicate lens. When I, trembling with fury, finally confronted her, she simply shrugged, her eyes devoid of any genuine remorse. It's just an old camera, Clara. You can get another one. Don't be so dramatic. My parents, when I tearfully recounted the incident, merely dismissed it as a simple accident and told me I was overreacting. Her pervasive, entitled presence was a constant, grating reminder of my endless sacrifices, of the continuous erosion of my boundaries. I started to work late at the archive, deliberately, almost pathologically, just to delay the inevitable moment of coming home to the suffocatingly tense, emotionally charged atmosphere. The relentless stress began to take a severe physical toll on my body. I found myself unable to sleep, plagued by constant, throbbing headaches, and consumed by a low-grade, pervasive anxiety that never, not for a single moment, seemed to dissipate. I was slowly, irrevocably, breaking. The wake-up call, the profound jolt of reality, came from an utterly unlikely and unexpected source. I had hired a quiet, unassuming contractor named Sal, an older, gruff man with calloused hands and kind eyes, to meticulously repair some damaged gutters on my house. He'd been working around the property for a few days, a silent, almost invisible presence. One particularly draining afternoon, I was on the phone with my mother, who was launching into one of her characteristic tirades about Chloe's dire need for new, expensive court attire for her upcoming legal appearances, subtly hinting, with her usual passive-aggressive finesse, that I, of course, should take her shopping. "Mom, I truly cannot," I pleaded, my voice thin with exhaustion, desperately trying to maintain a semblance of calm. "I'm already working so many exhausting hours. I simply don't have the time or the energy." "Clara, don't even start with that nonsense," my mother sighed, her patience, always thin for me, completely worn. "That's always been your problem, hasn't it? You consistently prioritize your trivial work and that old house before your family. Sometimes I genuinely wonder where your heart truly island." She hung up, the sharp click of the phone echoing in the sudden, crushing silence of my kitchen. I stood there, my eyes burning with angry, unshed tears, my whole body trembling with a mixture of hurt and indignation. I hadn't realized that Sal, having finished his work on the roof, had quietly descended his ladder and was now standing, a silent, sympathetic sentinel, at my back door. "Pardon me, ma'am," he said, his voice, though gravelly, surprisingly gentle. "I ain't trying to eavesdrop on family business, but I gotta say, you gotta draw a line. Don't let 'em treat you like that." I stared at him, genuinely surprised that a stranger had witnessed my humiliation. "What do you mean, Sal?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "I see the way they talk to you, ma'am," he said, slowly pulling off his worn work gloves, his gaze unwavering. "I see that young one, your sister, strutting around like she owns the whole damn place. A home, ma'am, ain't a hotel. This house," he gestured around him, his eyes taking in the lovingly restored details. "This ain't just bricks and mortar. It's hard work. It's sweat. It's peace of mind. It's you. Don't let nobody, not even family, take that from you. You built something real here." Oh, his simple, honest, and profoundly direct words, delivered without an ounce of judgment, hit me harder than any complex argument or emotional plea ever could have. He saw it. A complete stranger, an outsider, had seen the profound injustice that my own family, the people who were supposed to love and protect me, adamantly refused to acknowledge. For the very first time, in a long, long time, I felt utterly validated. I wasn't being selfish. I wasn't being cold-hearted. I was, unequivocally, being exploited. My quiet resolve hardened. Sal's powerful words echoed relentlessly in my mind for the next few days, a constant, unwavering drumbeat that solidified my nascent resolve. The next time they dared to ask, I would say no. I would finally, irrevocably, hold my ground. I had, in my years of passive compliance, naively thought that the mere act of uttering that one small word, no, would be the most incredibly difficult part. I had no idea, absolutely no idea, that they were no longer operating on the principle of asking. They were about to demand, with a ruthless, absolute certainty, and their final, crushing demand would push me far beyond any point of no return I had ever imagined. Unbearable act that irrevocably broke my spirit and ignited my resolve wasn't another insidious request for money. It was something far, far worse. It was a carefully orchestrated ambush, a calculated act of emotional violence, thinly disguised as a family meeting. I came home after an exceptionally long, grueling day at work, the exhaustion a heavy cloak upon my shoulders, looking forward to nothing more than a quiet, solitary evening within the sanctuary of my home. Instead, the scene that greeted me sent a cold dread through my entire body. My parents, Mark and Susan and Chloe, were sitting in my living room, their faces set in a grim, unified front, their expressions radiating a chilling, unspoken authority. "Clara, sit down," my father commanded, his voice devoid of his usual pretense of warmth, his hand gesturing towards the armchair opposite them, as if I were a recalcitrant child. "We need to talk. This is important." And my heart immediately started to pound, a frantic, warning drum in my chest. The air in the room was thick with an oppressive tension, a heavy, suffocating stillness that always precedes a violent storm. I could feel the familiar tightening in my stomach, the primal urge to flee, but I forced myself to sit, to face them. "Chloe's divorce is not progressing favorably," my mother began, her voice carefully modulated, attempting to project a sense of calm urgency that belied the panic in her eyes. "Richard is proving to be incredibly obstinate, relentlessly hiding assets, and this legal fight could realistically drag on for another year, perhaps even longer. We simply cannot sustain this, Clara. We are utterly exhausted, both emotionally and financially." "Oh, I understand, Mom," I said cautiously, my voice barely above a whisper, trying desperately to keep my emotions in check. "But I've already told you, repeatedly, I cannot give any more money. My resources are depleted." "We're not asking for money, Clara," Chloe interjected, her voice cutting and cold, surprisingly devoid of her usual histrionics. There was a new, chilling edge of authority in her tone, a smug certainty that sent a shiver down my spine. "We have a definitive solution." My father cleared his throat, a theatrical gesture, and looked me straight in the eye, his gaze unwavering, almost predatory. "We took the liberty of speaking to a real estate agent last week. This house, Clara, with all the significant improvements you've painstakingly made, is now, conservatively, valued at nearly $1.2 million. After deducting your remaining mortgage balance, you would walk away with almost $900,000 in readily accessible cash." I stared at him, my mind reeling, utterly unable to process the audacity, the sheer, brazen nerve of his words. A cold, paralyzing dread, like an icy hand, crept up my spine, chilling me to the bone. Why would you even dare to get my house appraised?" I managed to choke out, my voice barely audible, filled with a raw, visceral indignation. "It's the solution, Clara," my mother reiterated, her voice now oozing with a cloying, manipulative reasonableness. She leaned forward, her eyes fixed on mine, as if attempting to hypnotize me into compliance. "You simply sell the house. Then, you give Chloe a generous $500,000. That sum would be more than enough for her to finally settle her agonizing divorce, purchase a beautiful new place to live, and, most importantly, completely start her life over, free from Richard's toxic influence. With the remaining $400,000, you could effortlessly buy a charming, maintenance-free condo, perhaps even a quaint little cottage. Everybody wins, Clara. It's the perfect arrangement." Her words hung in the air, a poisonous, saccharine veil. I sat there, utterly stunned, immobilized, quite literally speechless. The very air seemed to be sucked from my lungs, leaving me breathless, gasping for air. They had, with a chilling disregard for my autonomy, meticulously planned out my entire life, cold-heartedly deciding the ultimate fate of my home, my sanctuary, all behind my back, without a single word of consultation or consideration. They spoke about it as if it were a mere business transaction, a disposable asset, as if my 4 grueling years of relentless labor, my countless hours of sweat, my silent tears meant absolutely nothing, as if my very identity was interchangeable with a financial ledger. "No," I whispered, the single defiant word barely escaping my lips, a fragile protest against their crushing demands. "What was that, Clara?" my father asked, his brow furrowed in a mask of feigned confusion, though I saw the flicker of irritation in his eyes. "No," I repeated, this time louder, my voice gaining a fragile strength. The answer is unequivocally no. I am absolutely not selling my house. My voice, though still trembling, was firm, resolute. Chloe's face, always quick to reveal her raw emotions, instantly contorted with unadulterated rage, a furious mask of disbelief. There you go again with this stupid house, Clara, don't you get it? Are you so unbelievably dense? My entire life is falling apart around me. I could very well end up with absolutely nothing, destitute, and you're still clinging to a pathetic pile of old wood and bricks like it's your precious child. Her words were a calculated strike, designed to wound, to diminish, to make my life seem utterly insignificant in the face of her manufactured crisis. "It is not a pile of old wood and bricks, Chloe," I yelled back, finally, inevitably, losing my hard-won composure, my voice cracking with a raw, primal emotion. "It is my home. It is my life. It is the only thing I have ever had in my entire life that is truly, unequivocally mine." The truth of my words hung in the air, undeniable. That's when my father, with a chilling sense of dramatic finality, delivered the final, devastating blow. He slowly stood up, towering over me, his imposing figure casting a cold shadow, his gaze fixed on mine with a look of cold, paternal disappointment, a look he had perfected over decades to bend me to his will. It was a look that had, for so long, crushed my spirit and forced my compliance. "All right, Clara. You've made your position abundantly clear," he said, his voice now entirely devoid of his usual superficial warmth, replaced by a cutting, surgical precision. "So we, too, will make ours equally clear. You have a definitive choice before you. You can choose to do the right thing for your family, for your sister who is in desperate need of your help. Or you can choose this house. But understand this, Clara, and understand it well. If you choose a mere building over your own flesh and blood, over the very ties of family, then as of tonight, you are no longer our daughter. You will be utterly, completely alone, disowned. The chilling ultimatum hung in the oppressive air, thick and toxic, its finality absolute and irrevocable. Sell my painstakingly built dream, the very embodiment of my independence, or lose my family, the only family I had ever known. And in that one brutal, agonizing moment of profound clarity, as I looked into the hard, unforgiving faces of the people I had, for so long, loved unconditionally, a painful, undeniable truth crashed down on me with the force of a tidal wave. I had already lost them long, long ago. Perhaps, with a bitter irony, I had never truly possessed their unconditional love to begin with. Their affection was conditional, their support a carefully calculated transaction. They didn't genuinely love me. They loved my utility, my unwavering reliability, my unending capacity to clean up their self-inflicted messes. In that searing, agonizing moment of brutal realization, something profound and irreversible shifted inside me. The paralyzing fear, the lifelong burden of obligation that had weighed me down, were not just diminished. They were, in that instant, completely burned away, leaving behind only a cold, hard, unwavering resolve. They, in their arrogance, believed they had finally cornered me, stripped me of all options. They had no idea, absolutely no idea, that in their ruthless pursuit of my destruction, they had just unwittingly unleashed a long-buried history, a dark family secret they'd spent an entire lifetime desperately trying to suppress and conceal. My silent, obedient existence was over. I didn't sleep a wink that night. The words of their ultimatum, sharp and unforgiving, hammered relentlessly in my head, echoing in the suffocating silence they had left behind. After my parents and Chloe, smug in their perceived victory, finally departed, leaving an oppressive void in their wake. I wandered aimlessly from room to room in my house, my sanctuary, my refuge. I touched the cool, restored walls, ran my fingers over the intricate crown molding, as if they could somehow impart to me the strength I so desperately needed. Choose this house or lose your family. The choice, so stark, so brutal, should have torn me asunder, ripped my very being apart. Instead, with a sudden, astonishing clarity, it brought an undeniable truth. I would not give up my home. And, more importantly, I would not give up myself. Around 3 a.m., when the city outside was cloaked in a deep, eerie stillness, I found myself, almost instinctively, drawn to my small office. This room, once a neglected corner of the old house, had been meticulously transformed into my personal archive, a carefully curated repository of forgotten histories and silent stories. My gaze fell upon an old oak filing cabinet, a sturdy piece I had rescued from a dusty antique store. I opened its locked top drawer, the creak of the wood a loud sound in the quiet room. Inside, nestled amongst stacks of historical documents I had yet to catalog, was a rusted tin box. I remembered finding it during the very first year of my arduous renovations, tucked away, almost purposefully, behind a loose brick in the master bedroom's grand fireplace. At that time, I had been so utterly consumed with the monumental task of structural repairs, the immense effort required to prevent the house from collapsing around me, that I had only glanced cursorily at its intriguing contents. I had then, with a fleeting sense of curiosity, put it away for later. Later, it seemed, had finally, undeniably, arrived. I placed the box carefully on my sturdy antique desk, the metal cold beneath my fingertips, and with a mix of trepidation and anticipation, slowly opened it. Inside, nestled amidst layers of faded tissue paper, was a leather-bound diary, its once pristine pages now brittle and deeply yellowed with the passage of time. Alongside it lay a small, thick bundle of documents, tied together with a faded, delicate ribbon, its vibrant color long since leached away by the relentless march of decades. The diary, its cover embossed with intricate, almost forgotten flourishes, belonged to a woman named Elspeth Finch, and the dates inscribed within its crumbling pages spanned from the late 1920 through the early 1930. As I began to read, slowly at first, then with increasing urgency, a long-forgotten, profoundly tragic piece of my own family's history, a narrative steeped in betrayal and injustice, began, with agonizing clarity, to unfold before my very eyes. One of the very first entries I read sent a cold, undeniable shiver down my spine, chilling me to the bone. The 4th of June, 1927. Henry tells me my passion for art is unladylike. He says I ought to find a husband, settle down, embrace a more proper life. But I find more companionship in my canvases, more truth in my paints, than in any suitor he so carefully presents. He looks at my inheritance, my rightful fortune, as if it is a personal insult to his own fragile ego, a symbol of everything he believes should belong to him. Elspeth Finch, I realized with a growing sense of shock, was my great-grandfather Henry's younger sister. She was, as her diary so vividly portrayed, a gifted artist, a woman of profound artistic talent and a fiercely independent spirit, who had, quite legitimately, inherited a considerable fortune from their wealthy, discerning parents. This house, the very house I now painstakingly restored, had been hers. The diary meticulously detailed her deep, abiding love for it, The vibrant paintings she created in her sun-drenched attic studio, and the ambitious dreams she harbored for a life of creative freedom. But, with each turning page, it also chronicled an increasingly dark and sinister story. Henry, my great-grandfather, consumed by a corrosive envy of his sister's wealth and unburdened freedom, began a systematic, insidious campaign to discredit her. He relentlessly spread malicious rumors throughout their social circle, painting her as unstable, eccentric, and unfit to manage her own affairs. A later, heartbreaking entry resonated with chilling familiarity. The 12th of October, 1928. The doctors visited again today, at Henry's relentless insistence. They looked at me with such patronizing pity, as if my fierce independence, my refusal to conform, were symptoms of some terrible malady. I fear what my brother is planning. He speaks, with an oily tenderness, of caring for me, of protecting my interests. But his eyes, I see them, are fixed, unblinking, on my bank ledgers, on the very numbers that represent my freedom. The accompanying bundle of documents, now clutched in my trembling hands, chillingly told the rest of the devastating story. There were archaic legal papers, original, official bank statements from long-defunct institutions, and brittle, yellowed correspondence. Henry, leveraging his position as her older brother and his social standing, had, with astonishing ease, managed to convince a panel of pliable doctors to declare Elspeth mentally incompetent, unfit to manage her own affairs. She was, in a cruel twist of fate, unjustly committed to a desolate sanatorium, a place of stark confinement, where she tragically lived out the remainder of her creative, independent life. Henry, having successfully maneuvered himself to be officially appointed the executor of her vast estate, then systematically, ruthlessly, liquidated her extensive investments, diverting the entirety of her inherited fortune directly into his own struggling, failing business ventures. He had, with cold calculation, stolen her entire inheritance, using it to build the very foundation of the Finch family fortune. The same fortune my father had proudly inherited and always boasted was the direct result of his own father's hard work and shrewd, impeccable business acumen. I sat there, utterly stunned, immobilized by the sheer magnitude of the betrayal, the historical injustice. This house, my beloved home, wasn't just a building I had purchased with my hard-earned money. It was, with a horrifying clarity, a living, breathing piece of my stolen heritage, a tangible monument to a crime. The bitter, gut-wrenching irony of my own blind, unquestioning loyalty to a family that had, for generations, built its comfortable existence on such a profound injustice, made me physically ill. They wanted me, the inheritor of this untold truth, to sell Elspeth's house, to sacrifice my own sanctuary, to bail Chloe out of a self-inflicted mess, thereby chillingly repeating the exact same pattern of sacrificing one woman in the family for the perceived benefit of another. The cycle of betrayal echoed through the decades. The very next morning, a new, cold resolve coursing through my veins, I immediately took decisive action. I called one of the most respected probate and estate lawyers in the city, a man renowned for his integrity and formidable legal acumen, Mr. Arthur Davies, whom I knew, casually, through my professional archival work. I explained the urgency, the gravity of my discovery, and secured an immediate, emergency appointment. As I sat in Mr. Davies's plush, elegantly appointed office, meticulously laying out the crumbling documents and the poignant diary, I witnessed a fascinating transformation. His initial professional skepticism, a cautious wariness typical of his profession, slowly, steadily, transmuted into an expression of profound professional astonishment. He carefully examined each paper, his sharp, experienced eyes meticulously scanning the archaic legal terminology, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Miss Finch, Miller," he corrected himself, a slight, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. "This, if I may say so, is an extraordinary discovery. Truly remarkable. These documents, Miss Miller, appear to be unequivocally genuine. If we can successfully authenticate them in court, and I am confident we can, you not only have an irrefutable legal claim to this house, a claim that transcends any simple purchase agreement, you, in fact, may have a legitimate legal claim to a very significant portion of your own family's inherited estate, directly stemming from the historical misappropriation of your great-aunt Elspeth's substantial inheritance. I don't want their money, Mr. Davies," I interjected, my voice firm, resolute, betraying none of the inner turmoil I felt. "I want them to leave me alone. I want respect. I want them to understand unequivocally that they have no right whatsoever to this house, nor to dictate the course of my life." My words, I realized, were not just for him, but for myself, a solemn declaration of independence. Mr. Davies nodded slowly, a profound, understanding smile spreading across his wise face. "I understand completely, Miss Miller. In that case, we possess an incredible amount of leverage, a powerful tool. We will not, I assure you, threaten an immediate lawsuit. That would be premature. Instead, we will extend an invitation to them for a meeting. Here, in the sanctity of my office, we will, with an unwavering calm and absolute professionalism, present our incontrovertible findings. We will, quite simply, show them that the entire board has been completely, irrevocably, reset in your favor." Leaving Mr. Davies's office, the weight of the historical truth a palpable presence, I felt a surge of power, a fierce, protective energy I had never known existed within me. I was no longer Clara, the dutiful, compliant daughter, forever striving to maintain a fragile family peace. I was the unwavering keeper of Elspeth's long-forgotten legacy, her silent advocate. I wasn't just fighting for my house anymore. I was fighting for a profound, historical truth that had been unjustly buried for far too long. I went home, the weight of the revelation a constant companion, and meticulously drafted a brief, formal email to my parents and Chloe. It read, with an almost surgical precision, "Before any final decisions are made regarding the house located on Elm Street, I require your immediate attendance at a meeting at the office of my attorney, Arthur Davies, on Wednesday at 10 a.m. This meeting, I must emphasize, pertains directly to the newly discovered history of the property and is of vital, undeniable importance to our entire family. Armed with the unassailable truth, bolstered by formidable legal expertise, I was no longer the quiet, obedient lamb led to slaughter. I was the rightful heiress to a forgotten history, and I was, finally, about to call my family to account for generations of injustice. The confrontation was coming, a storm long brewing, but this time it would unfold, definitively, on my terms. The era of my quiet compliance was over. That Wednesday morning, the air thick with an unspoken anticipation, I arrived at Mr. Davies's office a full half-hour early. The city outside buzzed with its usual frantic energy, but inside, the quiet professionalism of the law firm was a stark contrast. I wore a meticulously tailored, dark suit, chosen not for fashion, but as a symbolic suit of armor for the battle ahead. Mr. Davies, ever the composed professional, greeted me with a brief, reassuring nod and a calm smile. We sat in his spacious conference room, a stately, imposing space that exuded quiet authority. with its towering, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves overflowing with leather-bound legal tomes and a long, gleaming mahogany table, polished to a mirror shine, dominating the center. Before me, laid out with surgical precision, were the certified copies of Elspeth's damning documents, the diary, and various legal statutes. My family, predictably, arrived precisely on time, a clear indication, despite their bravado, of how seriously they were taking this summons. My father, Mark, strode in first, his usual self-assured posture radiating a practiced confidence, as if he were merely entering another routine business negotiation he knew, without a shadow of a doubt, he was destined to win. My mother, Susan, followed closely behind, her face a complex canvas of barely concealed anxiety and grim, brittle determination. Chloe, ever the drama queen, trailed in last, her face a mask of petulant impatience and thinly veiled resentment, her eyes flicking nervously around the imposing room. They collectively chose the seats directly opposite me, the three of them forming a tight, seemingly unified front, a silent, defiant wall against whatever I was about to unleash. "All right, Clara," my father began, his voice cutting sharply through the tense silence, wasting no time on pleasantries. "What is this all about? You've gone and hired a lawyer? Is this just another one of your attempts to delay the inevitable, to prolong this foolishness?" His tone was dismissive, condescending. Mr. Davies, a master of subtle authority, cleared his throat, and his mere presence, his calm, unwavering demeanor, immediately shifted the dynamic in the room, imbuing it with a palpable sense of gravity. "Good morning, Mr. and Mrs. Miller. Miss Miller? I am Arthur Davies. Clara has specifically requested my presence today to clarify some exceedingly important legal matters pertaining to the property located on Elm Street." Chloe, true to form, rolled her eyes with an audible sigh of exasperation. "Oh, we know all about it. She owns it. And she needs to sell it. End of story. Can we just get this over with?" Her impatience was a brittle shield against her growing unease. "Actually, Mr. Davies interjected, his voice unhurried, calm, and imbued with an almost surgical precision. "The story, Miss Miller, is quite a bit more complicated than that. In fact, it runs much deeper than any of you could possibly imagine." He then, with a subtle, almost imperceptible gesture, indicated for me to begin. I took a deep, steadying breath, feeling the combined weight of their three sets of eyes fixed intensely upon me. My heart was pounding, a wild drumbeat, but I focused on the truth, letting it ground me. "During my meticulous restoration of the house," I began, my voice, to my own surprise, remarkably steady and clear, "I found some personal effects, long hidden, belonging to the original owner, a woman named Elspeth Finch." "Finch?" my mother repeated, her brow furrowing in confusion, her memory working. "But that was your grandmother's maiden name. My mother's maiden name." A flicker of recognition, of unease, crossed her face. "Exactly, Mom," I confirmed, meeting her gaze directly. "Elspeth Finch was our great-grandfather, Henry's younger sister. She was, in fact, our great-aunt. And the house on Elm Street, the very house you demand I sell, was unequivocally hers." The finality of my words hung in the air, undeniable. "This is a fascinating, if rather dark, fairy tale, Clara," my father finally interrupted, his voice strained, a desperate attempt to regain some semblance of control to dismiss my words. "But what, precisely, does this century-old anecdote have to do with the current, pressing financial situation that Chloe faces?" "It has everything to do with it, Dad," I said, my voice gaining strength, steeling myself for the final blow. I then, with deliberate slowness, pushed Elspeth's fragile, leather-bound diary across the gleaming table. its ancient pages a silent, powerful witness. These are Elspeth's own words, her truth, written in her own hand, detailing her terror, her betrayal. I paused, letting the weight of her suffering settle upon them, before pushing the thick bundle of legal documents across the table, their official seals and archaic script a stark contrast to the emotional testimony of the diary. And this, Dad, is the incontrovertible proof. Mr. Davies, sensing the opportune moment, took over, his voice resonating with quiet authority. These documents, Mr. Miller, are not just old papers. They are original bank statements from the 1,920 seconds. Official legal correspondence between Henry Finch and various institutions, and a certified copy of the very court order that, through manipulation and deceit, appointed Henry Finch as the executor of his sister's estate. Collectively, they painstakingly demonstrate a clear, undeniable pattern of systematic embezzlement. The very foundation of your family's generational wealth, Mr. Miller. The substantial inheritance you so proudly received from your own father, who in turn inherited it from Henry, was built directly, unequivocally, on money stolen from Elspeth. A century of family fortune is, in fact, rooted in a historical crime. Oh! A thick, suffocating silence descended upon the room, heavier and more profound than any I had ever experienced. My father, his hands visibly trembling, picked up the documents, his eyes frantically scanning the archaic letterheads and faded signatures, the irrefutable evidence of his family's dark past. He avoided my gaze, his face a horrifying mask of disbelief, slowly, sickeningly, turning to an ashen white. My mother, her hand flying to her mouth, looked utterly distraught, as though she might at any moment collapse into a heap. That simply can't be true," she whispered, her voice barely audible, filled with a raw, desperate denial. "Our family. We're good people. We've always been good people." Chloe, bless her superficial heart, was, as always, the first to erupt, her self-centered outrage momentarily eclipsing the dawning horror of the truth. "So what?" she shrieked, her voice shrill, cutting through the heavy silence. "That all happened 100 years ago. What in God's name does any of that ancient history have to do with me? I'm still getting a divorce, a devastating public divorce, and I still need help. Your precious history doesn't solve my problems." "It has everything to do with you, Miss Miller, Mr. Davies stated firmly, his voice ringing with undeniable authority. "Because, legally, Clara, as the direct descendant who meticulously discovered this multi-generational fraud, and as a blood relative of the unjustly dispossessed Elspeth, possesses an incredibly strong, undeniable legal claim. If we, on Clara's behalf, were to pursue this matter in probate court, a judge would have the immediate authority to freeze your family's assets and initiate a full, sweeping investigation into their very provenance. The inevitable result could be a devastating judgment, ordering the restitution of Elspeth's entire inheritance, compounded by decades of accrued interest. To put it in terms you might better understand, Miss Miller, your family, your parents, could, quite simply, lose everything." Obey. The chilling, irrefutable reality of his words finally, irrevocably, sank into their stunned minds. Chloe, her mouth agape, stared at Mr. Davies, her face a ghastly shade of white. Her characteristic anger, her petulant indignation, had completely evaporated, replaced by an expression of pure, unadulterated panic. My father, his imposing figure suddenly seeming small and frail, slowly, heavily, slumped back into his chair, looking as if he'd aged 50 years in as many minutes. His face was a roadmap of defeat. "What? What do you want, Clara?" he asked, his voice now a hoarse, defeated whisper, stripped bare of all his former authority and arrogance. His eyes, devoid of their usual condescension, met mine, filled with a desperate, pathetic plea. This was the moment. The profound, irreversible moment the power dynamic had completely, irrevocably shifted. "I'll tell you exactly what I don't want, Dad," I said, my voice cool, clear, and unwavering, the years of suppressed resentment finally finding its voice. "I don't want a single cent of your stolen money. I don't want a protracted, emotionally draining legal battle that would drag all of our names through the mud and destroy any semblance of peace. And I am certainly, absolutely, unequivocally not selling my house." My gaze swept over all three of them, daring them to interrupt. I leaned forward, my hands flat on the polished mahogany table, my posture radiating a newfound, unyielding strength. "Here is precisely what is going to happen. You, Mom and Dad, will never, ever again mention the sale of my house. You will, both of you, apologize to me, sincerely and unequivocally, for issuing such a cruel, dehumanizing ultimatum, for treating me as a disposable asset. Chloe, you and you alone will handle your own divorce proceedings. My parents may, if they choose, continue to support you emotionally, but the family's endless financial pipeline, particularly any expectations of monetary support from me, is now permanently closed. And finally, as a means to begin to atone for generations of injustice, we will establish a modest scholarship fund in Elspeth Finch's name for young, aspiring female artists, a fund that will be entirely financed from the family estate, as a tangible step towards attempting to right the profound wrongs of the past. "I'm so incredibly sorry, Clara," she said, her eyes welling with genuine tears, her voice choked with a remorse I had never thought possible. "I was so utterly blind. I always saw Chloe as the one who desperately needed protecting, the fragile one, and I, foolishly, assumed you were so strong, so incredibly capable, that you simply didn't need me. I took your unwavering strength, your boundless generosity, for granted. I was profoundly, terribly wrong." It was, I realized, a tentative start, not a complete resolution, but a fragile, hopeful beginning. We began the slow, arduous process of rebuilding our relationship, brick by painstakingly placed brick. It was, and continues to be, fundamentally different from what it once was. There are now firm, non-negotiable boundaries, meticulously established and, for the most part, respectfully upheld. She has learned, through bitter experience, to ask before assuming, to listen before speaking, and, crucially, to respectfully accept my no without argument or manipulation. The dynamic, once toxic, is slowly, painstakingly shifting towards something healthier, more equitable. Thank you for listening, for bearing witness to my journey. And remember, with every fiber of your being, that you have every inherent right, every undeniable right, to protect, to defend, and to cherish your own foundation.